doing a risk analysis to see what's more expensive.
What'd you come up with?
We're pretty fucked either way.
Yes, the question is, can we find it?
The likelihood of a successful
Angela can take care of herself.
Ainsley, then.
For me.
I'm trying.
No, there was a breakfast sausage clone.
Ainsley, just a little deodorant could go a long way, honey.
And a shower.
But for the hope that maybe she was in there somewhere, son.
I gave her my word, Tom. Does it kill the company? Absolutely. But that company died when her husband died.
How dare you? There you go, baby.
Landman Season 2 Episode 8 doesn't try to shock you with chaos or spectacle instead. It does something far more unsettling. It slows everything down and forces you to sit with the consequences that have been building all season. This episode feels like the moment where the show finally stops pretending there's an escape route. No last-minute miracle, no clever deal that saves the day, just pressure, truth, and the uncomfortable realization that some decisions can't be undone from the very beginning. The episode makes it clear that whatever hope the characters were clinging to is wearing thin. Tommy enters this episode already exhausted, and you can feel it in everything he does. He's no longer moving with confidence or purpose. He's reacting. Every conversation feels heavier, every choice more loaded. The weight that Rebecca warned about hasn't disappeared at all, it's simply shifted. Exactly as she feared, now it sits squarely on Tommy's shoulders, and for the first time, he doesn't seem sure he can carry it. The show does a great job of showing this without spelling it out. His silences last longer, his answers are less certain. He's still trying to play the role of the man who has everything under control. But the cracks are impossible to ignore. One of the most important things Episode 8 does is show how trapped Tommy really is. On paper, he still looks powerful. People still come to him for answers. Cammy still believes in him, but behind that image, the options are disappearing fast. Every path leads to the same place, just through different kinds of damage. If he tells the truth, the company collapses immediately. If he keeps lying, it collapses later and takes more people down with it. The episode doesn't rush this dilemma, it lets it breathe, which makes it hurt more. You start to understand that Tommy isn't just afraid of losing the company. He's afraid of being exposed as someone who never actually had a solution. Cammy, meanwhile, represents something dangerous in this episode: trust. She believes in the vision. She believes in Tommy's ability to turn chaos into opportunity, and the more she believes, the more tragic it becomes. There's a quiet tension in every scene involving her because the audience knows what she doesn't. Her confidence is built on incomplete information. Tommy keeps choosing silence, convincing himself he's protecting her when in reality he's setting her up for a much harder fall. The episode never frames this as villainy. It's worse than that, it frames it as weakness. And that makes it far more human. What really stands out in this episode is how final everything feels. Conversations aren't about if anymore, they're about when. Even when characters talk about plans or strategies, there's an unspoken understanding that none of them actually fix the core problem. The company isn't struggling because of one bad decision or one unlucky event. It's rotting from the inside, weighed down by past choices, misplaced loyalty, and a refusal to accept reality. Episode 8 doesn't shout this at you. It lets the truth emerge slowly, piece by piece. This is also the episode where the emotional cost of leadership becomes impossible to ignore. Tommy isn't just risking money. He's risking people, careers, trust, relationships. Every lie he tells buys him time. But it also deepens the damage, and the show is very intentional about showing that time itself has become the enemy. The longer he waits, the fewer doors remain open. By the end of this first stretch of the episode, you're left with a heavy realization: there is no clean ending coming. Only choices between different kinds of loss. And that's what makes Episode 8 so effective. It doesn't rely on twists or dramatic reveals, it relies on inevitability. The sense that everything we've been watching all season has been leading here. The characters might not fully see it yet, but the audience does. The fall isn't coming anymore. It's already started. As Episode 8 continues, the focus tightens around the people who understand the danger but are powerless to stop it. Rebecca is one of them. Even though Tommy reassured her earlier, the fear never really left. It couldn't. This episode makes it clear that her relief was temporary, not because Tommy lied to her, but because the system itself is unstable. Rebecca operates in a world where paper trails matter, where records last forever, and where being associated with the wrong decision can erase years of hard work. Episode 8 shows her watching this situation unfold with growing dread. realizing that even if she survives professionally, the damage around her will define how she's remembered. Nate's presence looms large, even when he isn't speaking much. Just like before, he doesn't need to raise his voice or make threats. His power comes from clarity. He sees the shape of what's coming long before others are ready to admit it. In this episode, Nate doesn't offer comfort or reassurance, he offers reality. The legal paths are narrowing. The financial math isn't improving, delaying consequences doesn't erase them, it just concentrates them. Every interaction with him feels like a reminder that the clock isn't just ticking, it's running out. Charlie, on the other hand, continues to embody risk in its purest form. To him, danger is still abstract, something to be managed with confidence and bravado. Episode 8 quietly challenges that mindset. For the first time, you can sense hesitation creeping in. Not enough to stop him, but enough to crack the image he's built around himself. The gamble that once felt exciting now carries a weight he can't ignore. The show doesn't turn him into a coward or a villain. It simply shows what happens when belief in risk collides with consequences you can't talk your way out of. What's especially effective in this section of the episode is how isolated everyone feels. These characters are surrounded by people, meetings, conversations, yet none of them feel truly connected. Information is fragmented. Truth is compartmentalized. Everyone is acting based on partial knowledge. And that fragmentation is what makes the situation so dangerous. No one person sees the full picture except maybe Nate. And even he can't force honesty where it doesn't exist. The system depends on silence, and silence is exactly what's poisoning it. Tommy's leadership is tested in subtle but brutal ways here. People still look to him for direction. But the confidence behind his answers is fading. He keeps choosing the path that avoids immediate fallout, convincing himself that he's buying time to fix things. But episode 8 makes it painfully clear that he isn't fixing anything, he's postponing collapse. Each delay compounds the eventual impact. The episode doesn't frame this as stupidity. It frames it as fear of disappointing Cammy, fear of admitting failure, fear of facing the truth that some businesses don't fail because of bad luck, but because they were never sustainable to begin with. Cammy's faith becomes even more heartbreaking in this stretch of the story. She speaks about the future with optimism, about growth, legacy, and potential, and every time she does, the audience feels the tension spike. Her vision is sincere, but it's built on an illusion. Tommy listens, nods, and stays quiet. And that silence becomes one of the loudest elements of the episode. The show wants you to feel uncomfortable watching this, and it succeeds. This isn't manipulation played for drama, it's a slow moral erosion. By the end of this section, episode 8 has shifted from warning to confirmation. The characters aren't approaching danger anymore, they're inside it. The choices they make now won't determine whether things fall apart, they'll only determine how much collateral damage there is when it finally happens. And the most unsettling part is that deep down, they all seem to know it. The emotional center of episode 8 settles into something much quieter and much heavier. This is where the show stops dealing in hypotheticals and starts forcing its characters to sit with what they already know but refuse to say out loud. Tommy, in particular, spends much of this episode wrestling with the truth in isolation. He talks to people, he listens, he gives direction, but none of it feels collaborative anymore. It feels performative. He's playing the role of a leader because the alternative is admitting that the role itself has outgrown him. One of the most striking elements in this section is how often Tommy pauses before speaking. Those pauses matter, they signal hesitation, calculation, and fear. The show uses silence as a storytelling tool, and it works. Each delay in his response feels like a battle between honesty and survival. And every time, survival wins, not because it's right, but because it's easier. Episode 8 doesn't judge him for this. It lets the audience sit with the discomfort of understanding why he keeps making the wrong choice. Rebecca's storyline deepens here in a subtle but important way. She begins to realize that her fate is no longer in her own hands. Even if she does everything correctly from this point forward, she's still tied to decisions that were made long before she had full context. That realization is terrifying, and the episode doesn't rush past it. You can feel her calculating risk not just in financial terms, but in personal ones: reputation, future opportunities, the quiet fear of becoming a cautionary tale. This is where her earlier panic starts to make more sense. She wasn't overreacting. She was seeing the cliff before anyone else did. Nate re-enters the story with the same calm precision that makes him so unsettling. He doesn't argue. He doesn't persuade. He simply outlines consequences. What happens if the truth comes out later? What happens if records are examined? What happens when silence becomes evidence? Every sentence he delivers feels like a door closing. There's no anger in him, which somehow makes it worse. He's not trying to punish anyone. He's describing gravity, and gravity doesn't care how good your intentions were. Meanwhile, Charlie's confidence continues to erode, though he refuses to acknowledge it openly. His belief in risk starts to sound more like denial than philosophy. The episode subtly reframes his earlier romanticism about gambling. What once felt bold now feels irresponsible, not because the risk itself has changed, but because the people depending on him have become more visible. Episode 8 makes it clear that bravado doesn't shield you from accountability, it only delays it. One of the most effective choices the episode makes is refusing to offer relief. There's no scene where everything briefly feels okay, even moments that should feel stabilizing carry an undercurrent of dread. Conversations end without resolution. Plans are made without confidence. Promises are spoken without conviction. The audience is never allowed to relax because the characters themselves can't. This sustained tension gives the episode its documentary-like weight. It feels less like scripted drama and more like watching a slow-motion failure unfold in real time. By the end of this section, a painful truth becomes unavoidable. Everyone is complicit. Even if not equally responsible, the system didn't break overnight. It was held together by optimism, silence, and the hope that someone else would fix it. Episode 8 strips that hope away. What remains is responsibility, and no one wants to be the one holding it. As Episode 8 moves deeper, the story begins to narrow its focus not outward toward solutions, but inward toward accountability. This is the part of the episode where denial finally starts to lose its grip, not because the characters suddenly become brave, but because reality becomes too loud to ignore. The pressure that's been building quietly all season now settles into every interaction, every decision, every unfinished sentence. No one is panicking yet, but the calm feels artificial. Like the moment just before something collapses, Tommy is at the center of this slow unraveling. What's striking here is that he's no longer pretending everything is fine, at least not to himself. The confidence he once projected outward is gone. In private moments, you can see him replaying conversations in his head, second-guessing choices that once felt inevitable. He understands now that the problem isn't just financial or legal, it's structural. The company was built on assumptions that no longer hold, and he's been propping them up with silence. Episode 8 forces him to confront the fact that leadership isn't about having answers anymore. It's about deciding who pays the price when the answers don't exist. The tension between Tommy and Cammy becomes more uncomfortable in this section. Precisely because nothing explodes, there's no argument, no dramatic confrontation, just polite conversations filled with unspoken truths. Cammy continues to speak in terms of future growth and long-term vision, and Tommy listens like a man attending his own trial. Every reassuring nod feels like a betrayal not just of her trust, but of his own integrity. The episode makes it painfully clear that his silence isn't neutral, it's an active choice, and it's shaping outcomes whether he admits it or not. Rebecca's role in this part of the episode is quieter but no less important. She starts pulling back. Not emotionally, but strategically. There's a subtle shift in how she speaks, how she frames her concerns. She's protecting herself now, even if it means creating distance. This isn't selfishness, it's survival. Episode 8 does a good job of showing how people adapt when they realize loyalty won't save them. Rebecca still cares about the company, but she's no longer willing to sync with it. And that realization carries its own kind of guilt. Nate continues to function as the episode's moral pressure point. He doesn't push anyone toward a decision. He simply keeps reminding them that indecision is still a decision. The longer things remain unresolved, the more responsibility accumulates. His presence strips away the comfort of ambiguity. You can see how much the others want him to be wrong. Not because his logic is flawed, but because accepting it would force action. And action at this stage means damage. One of the most unsettling aspects of this section is how normal everything looks on the surface. Meetings still happen, calls still get answered. Work continues. That normalcy becomes disturbing once you realize it's built on denial. Episode 8 captures that eerie feeling perfectly. The world doesn't stop when a company starts dying. It keeps moving, indifferent, while the people inside pretend momentum equals stability. The show leans into this realism and it pays off. It feels honest, almost uncomfortable in how familiar it is. There's also a growing sense that blame is about to become a weapon. Not yet, but soon. You can feel characters mentally preparing for that shift, deciding where they stand, who they'll protect and who they won't. Trust begins to fracture quietly and invisibly. Episode 8 doesn't rush this process. It lets suspicion grow naturally, fed by fear and uncertainty. By the end of this section, it's clear that unity is no longer possible. The best anyone can hope for now is containment. This is the moment where the episode stops asking whether the company can be saved and starts asking who will survive its failure, and that change in perspective is devastating. It reframes every relationship, every past sacrifice, every promise that was made in good faith. The tragedy isn't that things are falling apart. It's that they're doing so slowly enough for everyone to understand exactly what's being lost. Asterisk asterisk, by the time episode 8 reaches this point, the tension has settled into something colder and more deliberate. This is no longer about fear and the abstract. It's about anticipation. Everyone can feel what's coming, even if they're still pretending not to see it. The episode leans heavily into that feeling, showing how people behave when they know a reckoning is inevitable but don't know exactly when it will arrive. That uncertainty becomes its own kind of punishment. Tommy's internal conflict deepens in a way that feels almost suffocating. He's still functioning, still making calls, still showing up, but something in him has shifted. The belief that he can outthink the situation is fading. What replaces it isn't clarity, but resignation. He starts to understand that every option in front of him carries damage, and the question is no longer how to avoid loss, but how to choose which loss he can live with. Episode 8 doesn't let him verbalize this realization outright. Instead, it shows it through hesitation, through decisions that feel delayed rather than deliberate. This is also where the emotional cost of leadership fully comes into focus. Tommy isn't just responsible for numbers on a spreadsheet, he's responsible for people who trusted him to see further than they could. That weight hangs over every interaction, especially with Cammy. Her confidence hasn't wavered, and that makes his silence feel heavier than ever. The more she believes, the more isolated he becomes. The episode makes it clear that he's crossed a line where honesty would no longer feel like courage, it would feel like betrayal. Rebecca, meanwhile, begins to emotionally detach in ways that are subtle but unmistakable. She's still present, still engaged, but there's a distance now, a carefulness. She's learned that reassurance doesn't equal safety, and that promises can dissolve the moment accountability arrives. Episode 8 treats her shift with respect. It doesn't frame her as cold or calculating, it frames her as someone who understands the rules of the game too well to pretend they don't apply to her. Her fear hasn't disappeared. It's become focused. Nate's role becomes increasingly important here, not because he takes control, but because he refuses to soften reality. He continues to outline consequences without emotion, without apology. The effect is chilling. His presence forces everyone else to confront the difference between hope and probability. He doesn't say the company is doomed, he simply explains what happens when truth arrives late. And by now, everyone understands that it will arrive. The only uncertainty is who it will land on first. What episode 8 does especially well in this section is show how responsibility starts to shift quietly. Not through formal decisions, but through behavior. People begin positioning themselves. Sometimes without even realizing it, conversations become more careful. Words are chosen more precisely. The unspoken question behind every exchange is the same: where will I stand when this collapses? That question poisons trust without a single accusation being made. Charlie's earlier confidence is almost completely gone now, replaced by a kind of stubborn denial. He still talks about risk, still frames uncertainty as opportunity, but it sounds hollow. Episode 8 doesn't humiliate him or strip him of dignity. It simply shows how belief in risk becomes dangerous when it refuses to evolve. His worldview hasn't changed, even as the consequences have, and that rigidity makes him just as trapped as everyone else. The final stretch of episode 8 strips everything down to its emotional core. There are no new plans introduced here, no sudden reversals, no dramatic saves. Instead, the episode forces its characters to confront the cost of everything they've been avoiding. This is where Landman stops being about business, risk, or strategy, and becomes about regret. About the quiet understanding that some mistakes don't announce themselves until it's too late to fix them. Tommy reaches the end of his internal resistance here. Not in a loud or explosive way, but in a deeply personal one. He finally allows himself to acknowledge what he's known for a long time but refused to accept. That the company didn't start dying recently, it's been dying slowly, held together by loyalty, memory, and the hope that effort alone could replace truth. When he returns to Galliano searching for clarity, he isn't looking for advice anymore. He's looking for permission to stop pretending. And what he gets instead is honesty in its rawest form. Galliano doesn't comfort him. He doesn't offer solutions. He delivers a truth that cuts deeper than any financial loss ever could. The company died the day the husband died. Everything after that was survival, not growth. Momentum without direction. And hearing it spoken out loud finally breaks the illusion Tommy has been protecting. In that moment, you can see the weight of years settle onto him. Not just the weight of failure, but the weight of responsibility for dragging others along with him. What makes this moment so powerful is that it isn't cruel, it's necessary. Galliano isn't trying to hurt Tommy, he's freeing him from denial, and that freedom comes at a cost, because once the truth is acknowledged, there's no room left for hope built on silence. Tommy realizes that all the honesty he delayed has now become damage. Control instead of transparency. The courage he thought he was saving for the right moment no longer has value, timing matters. And he missed it. Cammy's role in the ending is quietly devastating. She remains unaware of the full truth, still placing her faith in Tommy's ability to carry the weight. That trust, given so freely, becomes the episode's most painful element because the audience knows what's coming. Her belief isn't misplaced because Tommy is malicious. It's misplaced because he's human, and humans break long before systems do. The episode makes you sit with that discomfort. There's no relief in knowing the truth if the people who need it most are still in the dark. Rebecca's earlier fear finally feels justified here, not because she's about to be destroyed, but because she understands how responsibility travels. The danger didn't disappear, it moved. And now it rests on Tommy. The pressure she felt wasn't paranoia, it was foresight. Episode 8 quietly validates her instincts, even as it shows that survival sometimes means watching others take the fall. That realization is painful but honest as the episode closes. There's no dramatic collapse, no final explosion, just a heavy stillness, the kind that settles in after everything important has already happened. Tommy understands now that the ending won't change. No deal, no silence. No effort can rewrite what's already been decided. The only thing left is how it ends. And who gets hurt along the way. Landman season 2 episode 8 ends on that note of quiet tragedy, not with answers, but with acceptance. The kind that arrives too late to save anything, but just in time to make the loss fully understood, and that's what makes it so effective. It doesn't ask you to feel shocked, it asks you to feel the weight, and once you do, it doesn't let go.